All right, so first one for sine. The first thing I would do is, do you see that -3 that's out front? It always bothers everybody when that's written in the front instead of at the end. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is scribble that out and put the -3 at the end. I've just found over the years that it goes better if you do that. All right. Second thing is you are going to have to factor out that 5/2. So it's going to be written like this: -4 sine, and then we're going to take out the 5/2 GCF. It's greatest common factor. So it's going to look like that. The reason you have to do that is to find what the phase shift is. Dividing by 5/2 is the same as multiplying by 2/5. Okay, so just in your mind, think of distributing a 2/5 through here. It will give you x plus 2/5 pi. I get that 2/5 is kind of a weird fraction. You're gonna have to just trust the process. Let's start filling some of this in. What's something that we can fill in on our list? All right, what's our domain? Everything. Probably going to need to wait on the range until we have the graph. All right, how about amplitude? 4, good. You have to absolute value the -4. It needs to be positive. All right, period would be 2 pi over which number? 5/2, good. So that would be 2 pi times 2/5. I wrote that out, but if you can do that in your head, fine. What's that going to give you? And if you need to put the 2 pi over 1, if that helps you to see it better, you can do that. What is that going to give us?
4 times.
Yeah, 2 times 2 is 4, so 4 pi over 5, which again is a little bit weird, but that's fine. Phase shift is your left and right. So did this move left or right? Remember, it's kind of backwards. Right. Left 2/5 pi. And then what's our vertical translation? Yeah, down 3. You can write down 3 or just -3. If this calms you down at all, because I know these problems can be hard, I make them 10 points each. How many blanks did we fill in? Like, you've got half the points already. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you, like, it stresses you out. I'm trying to bring down the stress level. All right, where do you start in your table? Do you remember what goes in the first box? Yeah, phase shift, good. So -2/5 pi. And then you add the period because you want to do one cycle. So -2/5 pi plus 4/5 pi. So -2/5 plus 4/5 is 2/5. And that's actually not that bad. I know the fractions turned out a little bit weird, but what's actually kind of all right about that? 0's halfway between them. So it actually turned out not too bad. You kind of just need to trust the process sometimes. Wait, see where it takes you. All right, what's going to be halfway between 0 and 2/5? Yeah, 1/5, right? So this would be -pi over 5, and this is +pi over 5. It didn't turn out too bad. But if you can't get that, what did I tell you to do? Make it up. And what did I tell you to make up? Yeah, just do 0 pi over 2. Like, you need to keep going. Just fill it in with something. All right, this side, we're going to go around our circle. How do we get sine values from our unit circle? Y values, we're going to multiply them by -4 and then subtract 3. All right, what's our first Y value? 0 times -4 is 0 minus 3, -3. Now we're up here. You only use these ones for tangent and cotangent. What's your Y value now? 1. And so what does that give you out of the whole thing? Yeah, -7. And then the next one's going to put you back to -3. And then you're down there at the bottom of the circle. What's your Y value? At the bottom, -1 times -4, +4, -3, 1, and then back where you started. Now that's going to go off the grid. Okay, I didn't have this go all the way down to -7. So can you just do this? Like, put some extra tick marks halfway in between. See what I'm saying? Because then it'll fit. Now we want to count by fifths. What's the easiest way to count by fifths? Go to the 5th one, call it pi. And then I'm gonna go to the fifth one this way and call it negative pi. Label at least 2. I think I had been saying at least 3. If you label at least 2, I'll be happy. Label more than one of them though, okay? And then you just take this information, put it on there, and then I want you to continue it for one extra cycle. All right, so negative 2/5 pi, that would be right here, negative 3. So right there. And then down to negative 7. 0 is back to negative 3, and I'm going to stop narrating because I know that that gets annoying, but go ahead and fill it in. And again, this is what one cycle should look like. I just want you to do that one more time. And then don't forget to go back and answer the range. I try to leaf through, you guys know I do this on every test, leaf through and then, or I'll even just start grading them. And if you missed something, I'll give it back to you and be like, here, fill this in, but I can't catch everything. So, try to remember to check it over, make sure nothing's blank. What numbers are you stuck in between for your range? From where to where? -7 to 1. And brackets. All right, so let's pick one of secant or cosecant. I'll do one or the other, and I'm going to leave the other ones for you. Let's do number 4. So I'm going to say same thing. You see that 2 out front? Scribble that out and put a +2 at the end. It just ends up bothering everybody if it's written in the front. All right, and then we need to factor a pi out of these. So it's going to be negative secant, and then we're going to factor out a pi. And again, the factoring is so that you can see what the phase shift is. If you don't do that, you're not going to get your phase shift. But that one's actually not too bad. If you factor out pi, what's left? Yeah, x minus 3. So one wasn't too awful. All right, secant, that's your smiley faces and frowny faces. So you can't do domain and range yet, but what can we fill in? Can you tell me something we can go ahead and fill in? Yeah, amplitude is none. Good, vertical translation, V2. How about the phase shift? It's left and right. Remember, it's kind of backwards. Bless you. Good, 3. You can put the plus in front of it if you want. Or you can write right 3. All right, and then the period is 2 pi over b, which is what? Pi. So that's kind of interesting. What happens there? Yeah, pi's cancel and you just get 2. What that means is when you go into your table, there will be no pi. No pi in this one, okay? Because it canceled out. So where do we start? What's our first x value? 3. Perfect. And then you add the period. So 3 plus 2, 5. Halfway in between is 4. And then this would be 3.5. You know what? If you want to put a decimal, I'm fine with that. Whatever. As long as your answer's right, I'm happy. If you want to be fancy and put the fractions, do you know what 3.5 is in fraction form? 7/2. And then this one is 9/2. Whatever. If the answer's right, I'm pleased. All right. How do you get secant values from the circle? What do you do with x? You flip it, okay? So we're going to flip the x values, multiply them by a -1, and then add 2. What's your first x value? 1. If you flip 1, it is 1. We're going to make it negative, so -1 plus 2. After all that, it came out to 1 again. Now you're at the top of the circle. The x value is 0. You cannot flip 0, so undefined. And every other one is going to be undefined. Those are the asymptotes. The next one, from the circle, you get -1. If you flip that, it's still -1. -1. 1 plus 2, 3. My hope is at that point, you don't really need to look at the unit circle anymore. Like, what's the next thing? Yeah, and then the last one, it's gonna put you right back where you started. Now you have to count by halves. And listen, because this was the like one, it's not a big deal, but like the one kind of mistake I saw some people do on the quiz is they labeled this first tick mark 3 and then the next one 3.5. And that, like, you can't do that. If you're going to count by halves, the first one needs to be 1/2 and then 1 and then 1.5 and then 2. Like, it has to be uniform. It has to make sense. You can't just start wherever you want. The axis is 0. Like, it has to start at 0. So if you're going to count by halves, that's fine. And if you want to spread it out further, then that's fine too. Mine's going to be a little bit squished together, but whatever. And then just do at least 2 smiley faces and 2 frowny faces. So we're going to start at 3, 1, and then an asymptote. And when you continue this one on, you're going to want to make it go to the left. And why would I want to continue my pattern to the left instead of the right? Like, why would it make more sense to go this way? Yeah, you need the first one. Like, you need to know where the start is. Oh, whoops, I put that point in the wrong spot. And just make sure the U shapes don't like cross each other. You want to end up with that blank space in between them. All right, so let's go back and get the range. It would be negative infinity to what? You're going to go downwards to upwards. To 1, good. And then union 3 to infinity. And if your graph is wrong, but your range matches what you did, then you get credit for the range. You know, so like, yeah, the material is really hard, but I grade it in a forgiving way. All right, domain. And can I make this suggestion? Because people do this. They'll write all x not equal to, like they'll set it up like that and then forget to go back and answer it. Because if you're just glancing through, it looks like you put something on the line. So just don't put anything there until you're ready to answer the question. All right, where's the first asymptote?
0.5 or 1.
Yeah, 0.5 or 1. I'm going to write 1/2 just to make it fit in there. Plus, now for this one, it is half the period n. So our period was 2, half of that would be 1. So 1n. Or just n, you don't even need the 1. All right, and then I'm going to do either tangent or cotangent. Again, I'm trying to do one of each of the shapes. So I think if you go back, number 2 was cotangent. Or do you want to do the tangent one? I'll do whichever one. Cotangent, all right. So same thing, I would take that -1 and put it at the end. And then we're going to have to factor that. We're going to factor out a 1/4. And again, that's so you can see what the phase shift is. That's not too bad either, though, because they both have a 1/4 in them. If you factor out a 1/4, what's left? Yeah, x minus pi. All right, so let's do our automatic stuff for cotangent. What can we fill in? I'm going to fill in as much as we can. All right, range is everything, because it's going to be a wiggly thing. It's going to go up and down forever. Amplitude, none. How about the vertical translation? Yep, down 1. I try to get the easy stuff first. All right, phase shift, left or right, and it's kind of backwards. Right. Pi, good. And then the period is different. You only go halfway around the circle. So it's just pi over whatever. And what's that number in this case? Yep, 1/4. So dividing by a 1/4 is the same thing as multiplying by 4. So 4 pi. All right, cool. We're halfway done with the problem. Like, you got half the points already. All right, what goes in the first little box on our table? Pi, phase shift, and then you add 4 pi. So 1 pi plus 4 pi is 5 pi. And I believe you can just count by pi at that point, can you? 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, how do we get cotangent from the unit circle? I know it's been a minute, huh? Good, x over y, whoever whispered it over here, x over y. And then we're gonna multiply it by 2 and then subtract 1. But just remember, you're only going halfway around. We're just using the top part of it there. So for the first one, 1 over 0. What's that gonna give us? Yep, undefined, perfect. Now the next one is that square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. But anything over itself, 1 times 2 is 2, minus 1 is 1. Then you're at the tippy top of the circle, 0 over 1, 0 times 2 is 0, minus 1. They can't both be -1. What did I write wrong? Is the first one positive 1? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Brain hand disconnection. All right, now we're at the negative square root of 2 over 2 thing, but anything over itself is 1, it's just going to be -1 times 2 is -2 minus 1, -3, and then the last one, you're back where you started. All right, so I would just count by pi, or actually, you know what? I'm going to space this one out a little bit. I'm going to skip every other tick mark to give myself a little bit more room. You don't have to do that. That's, again, comes down to personal preference. That's why yours might look different than mine, but still be correct. All right, and then I'm going to be quiet. Everyone just take a minute and plot your graphs. All right, and then go back and get the domain. It's everything except, all right, where's the first asymptote? Pi plus, and then is it half the period or the whole period then?
The whole.
Yeah, for tangent cotangent, it's the whole thing because you only go halfway around. So what was the period? 4 pi. So 4 pi n. Go ahead and flip to the back. What we're gonna do is we'll do our break and then I'll do the back of this so that I do the matching in the word problem for you. And then I'm gonna give you the rest of the time to do the ones that we skipped. So here's my suggestion for the matching. I would go and do the factoring and rewriting before you even read any of these, because you're gonna need to do it to see what any of the phase shifts are. So look at this first one. You're gonna need to factor out that 1/4. So it's gonna be 5 cosine, and then you're gonna factor the 1/4 out. And set it up blank. I'm a big proponent of set it up blank. Dividing out a 1/4, same thing as multiplying by 4. So just pretend you're distributing a 4 through there. It would be x minus 4 pi over 2. What would that reduce down to? Yeah, 2 pi. Perfect. And again, the idea is if you distribute a 1/4, you'll get what you started with. You catch a break on this one because there's nothing to factor there. It's just 3x, so that's it. All right, letter E. I guess I didn't go A, B, C, D. I went down the column, whatever. I would scribble out that 2 and put +2 at the end. Again, I just find that that helps. And then we're going to factor out a 2/3, which is the same thing as multiplying by 3 over 2. So you kind of just want to imagine multiplying a 3 over 2 through that. So it would be x plus, all right, if you multiply this by a 3 over 2, what's going to happen to the 3's? Yeah, they're going to cancel, and you're just going to get what? Well, pi over 2. Good. Great. Let me write it out on the board so you can see it. If you take a pi over 3, no, this marker is great, and multiply it by 3 over 2, see how these cancel? You just get pi over 2. All right, this one, we're going to need to factor out, oh gosh, a 2 pi over 5. So that is the same as multiplying by 5 over 2 pi. So that will give you x minus, now if you multiply this by a 5/2 pi, basically just the pi's are gonna cancel. And so you're gonna get a 5/2. A lot of 2/5 and 5/2. It's fine though, it's all good. All right, this one, you're gonna need to factor out a 2. What would that leave you with? You're dividing out a 2. Be x minus what? 5/4, good. Again, you can check it by distributing through. If you were to distribute the 2 through there, you would get 2/4, which reduces to 1/2. You'll get what you started with. All right, and then last one, you're gonna put that +1 at the end. And we just need to factor out pi, which actually that one's not too bad. Because what's left if you factor out pi? Yeah, x minus 3, yeah, exactly, perfect. Okay, that's my suggestion. You can take it or leave it. That didn't take that long. I would just do that first and then go through and read them, because then it's like the work's all done. Now you can just match them up. All right, which one of them has the same period as this? All right, well, the period for this one would be 2pi/6, which would reduce down to what? Yeah, pi/3. So you need to go through and find one that has a period of pi/3. So look through, take a minute. Which one? Do you guys agree or disagree with C? That the period is pi/3. And yeah, that is right, because for tangent and cotangent, you just put pi over whatever number is there. So C. Perfect. All right, which one has a phase shift of negative or left pi/2? Well, we factored them all. Go find which one has the left pi/2. E, good. All right, this function does not have a vertical translation or phase shift, so it didn't move up, down, left, right. C, that has no changes in it. Well, it has a shrink, but it's not a vertical translation or phase shift. All right, the phase shift of this function is the same as the period of this one. All right, see how that's cotangent? To get the period, it's just pi/1/2. Tangent and cotangent is just pi, not 2pi. So what would that equal? Pi divided by 1/2. Yeah, 2pi. So you want one that's a phase shift of 2pi. So look through your choices. We factored them all. A, good, perfect. This function has a phase shift that's half its period. All right, so that's a little tougher. One has a phase shift that is half the period. Anyone have a guess? I think I see it. Which one did you say? That's the one I think too. Yeah. See how the phase shift is pi/4, but the period would be pi/2. So 1/4 and 1/2, that's half. So D for that one. I think that's the hardest one probably. All right, now this one says amplitude. That means it can only be which two functions? Yeah, it can only be sine or cosine. So A or B are your only two choices if it says amplitude. So same as the phase shift for this one. You'd have to factor out the pi, but you really don't need to write it. The phase shift is 9. So which one would that be? B, good. This one also says amplitude, so it's either A or B again. Amplitude is equal to the sum, that means adding, phase shift and period for function f. All right, so here's function f. The phase shift is 3. And the period would be 2pi/pi, which would be 2. So 3 plus 2, which is 5. So the amplitude of 5, that one's A. And then vertical translation of 1. So which one's got a +1 in it? That's good. Perfect. All right, and then last one, we'll do the word problem. So we got a Ferris wheel going around and around. All right, I realize that's a circle, but the height, it goes up and it comes back down, goes up and comes back down. So like the height graph is a wave. All right, period of the function. You're going to put 2pi over what part of that? Because there's a lot of numbers in there. Pi/3, good. It's whatever's in front of the x, in this case, t. So that's 2pi times 3/pi. So what is that going to give you? 6. Good. Now it says to write a sentence. Do you remember how the sentence starts? I know it's been like quite a while, but it should start the same way, all of them. Yeah, one cycle takes 6, and then was it minutes? It's just whatever the time. Yeah, minutes. And then you want to check, does that make sense? Does it make sense to take 6 minutes to go around once on the Ferris wheel? I mean, they move pretty slow, so that makes sense. All right, what is the greatest height the rider gets and the lowest? Well, it's centered at 14 and it goes up and down by 12. So what's the highest it's gonna get? Yeah, 26, and then was it meters, feet, yards, whatever it was, feet. And then the lowest would be 2 feet. And that should make sense. The Ferris wheel won't actually go into the ground. Like you've gotten on a Ferris wheel before, right? Or you at least know what a Ferris wheel is, like what I'm talking about. Like it doesn't hit the ground. The basket's always a little bit above the ground. All right, and then what is the height after 3 minutes? I would make a table. You need 5 blanks in your table. So what was our phase shift? You have to start with the phase shifts. 1.5. You just look at the equation, it's right there. And then you add the period, which we found was 6. So you're gonna add 6. So 1.5 plus 6, sorry, I kind of ran off the paper, 7.5. Now you have to figure out what's halfway in between. A lot of ways you can do that. You can average them, so add them together and divide by 2. You can make a number line and just leapfrog to the middle. You can kind of like guess and check it. Either way, what's halfway in between those? 4.5. And then what would this be? 3. And then 6. All right, and so we're going to start at 14. That's where the center is. And then it's going to go up to, we actually already figured it out, right? It'll go up to 26, back to 14, down to 2, back to 14. And I'm going to ask you one of the numbers that's on here. Like, I'm not going to ask you at 5 minutes. Do you see how 5 isn't on the table? I am going to teach you how to do that later in the year, find the ones that are in between. But for right now, I'm just asking you one of these. So at 3 minutes, the height is 26 feet. If you get stuck and you can't make a table, what are the only options for your answers? Because there's only 3 choices. Yeah, 14, 26, or 2. Pick one of them.